So, VK on the beat, check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1525 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team, the best baseball in the city outside the Dome. Join me August 4th at Christie Pitts. I'm recording live at 2 p.m. right after I throw out the first pitch. That's no joke, Mr. Kane. That's happening. Christie Pitts, August 4th. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut, is the last punk rock president, Steve Kane. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks very much, Mike. Thanks for the invite.
Does Strombo get the credit for that, the last punk rock president?
Actually, I'll correct it slightly, and I believe it was Steve McLean.
Okay.
Who called me the first punk rock president of a major label, and Strombo has also echoed that. Which
so he's calling the first, not the last, or both.
And chances are I'm the last as well, from what I can see going around. But I think it was originally Steve McLean, and that was based on both where I came from and my ethos of how you market and treat music and take an artist first approach, and mostly be involved.
Giving a shit?
Say that again.
Giving a shit?
Giving a shit was very important in my career for the 35 years that I worked at labels.
Okay, Steve, what kind of mood are you in? I just want to know. Are we in a mood you're going to be sharing stories, telling it like it is, ready to deliver the real talk?
Why don't we do a little of both?
Okay.
I've got some stories, I've got some opinions, and I'm usually pretty free with both of them.
And I don't want you leaving here, driving off, having said, "Oh, I held back here. I didn't tell the story I wanted to tell there." Listen, if I don't give you a decent segue, you just blast in there, man. I don't care. We'll pivot. I want all the stories. But are you ready to crack open our fresh Great Lakes beer right on the microphone?
Absolutely.
All right, get it right in front. Okay, Steve Kane cracked open a Canuck Pale Ale. And I've got my Sunnyside Session IPA. There you go, Steve. Cheers to you.
Cheers. That's a nice pale ale.
I like the Iggy Pop T-shirt.
The Stooges? Yep.
Yeah, that's amazing. Shout out to Iggy Pop. Still with us, defying all the odds. Still looks pretty good, I'd say, for a guy who, I don't know if he looked like he was going to make it out of his 20s, but he's still here.
It is absolutely a miracle that he's still amongst the walking. And again, somebody I had the privilege of working with when I was at Virgin Records in his probably his third incarnation. And the thing that the few times I did spend some time with him and his manager, there is a definite difference between Jim Osterberg and Iggy Pop. It is a persona that he turns on when it's time. And it was always interesting to watch that flips, that switch flip.
Is that sort of like Alice Cooper, right? You got Vincent Fournier, Let's Golf, maybe a little conservative, who knows? And then you got Alice Cooper, the showman, when he's on stage.
I think very much the same kind of deal.
Okay, I'll take Alice if that's okay. Alice, that's the name of the band. He just took the name of the band.
That's right, yeah. Well, that was one of the fun things about working in record shops when I first got to Toronto, is people looking for Alice Cooper under C.
Right.
And and then one of my favorite stories from that period. So I'm working on Yonge Street, Records on Wheels, late 70s, early 80s. And I remember one particular customer. We're standing behind the counter. It's a Friday night, so we always had a couple of beers stashed behind the counter. And then we see this kid just wandering up and down the aisle with befuddled look on his face. And finally approaches the counter and says, "This record store sucks. You don't have any Zeppelin." We realized that he'd been standing in front of the Zeds the whole time.
Goodness. Oh my goodness.
And one of my lovely coworkers just looked at him and said, "Do you have a fucking plate in your head?" The high point of customer service at independent record shops.
Okay, so you said when you first came to Toronto. So where the hell did you come from, Steve Kane?
Well, I was, as my father used to remind me, I was made in Scotland, assembled in Canada. So I was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we came here when I was 6 years old. Okay. So grew up in Oshawa, which I think is why one of the reasons I have a fascination with Detroit and Detroit bands. You know, when I grew up, the sign...
of the GM plant and then Motor City. I gotcha.
Yeah, and actually we spent our first 6 months in Canada, in Windsor. So the very first place I ever visited in America was Detroit, December of 1967, which would have been 6 months after the Detroit uprisings.
Right. Okay. Gordon Lightfoot should have wrote a song about that.
Black Day in July.
Absolutely. Love that song, by the way. I want to shout out Troy Birch real quick. He was here earlier today. He's with Great Lakes Brewery. We recorded his podcast. And Troy Birch, who's from Orillia, that's why when you said, well, I guess I said Gordon Lightfoot, but I remembered, oh yeah, they're from Orillia. And he hooked me up with Cypress Hill tickets for tomorrow night at the Toronto Festival of Beer. So I'm looking forward to Cypress Hill. I said to my wife, "Do you want to come to Cypress Hill?" She said, "What's that?" So I had, she had a little catching up to do here. But we're drinking our Great Lakes. So like I said, you got the Canuck Pale Ale. You're going to bring some fresh craft beer home with you as well, Steve. So that's from Great Lakes Brewery.
Well, that sounds like a perfect parting gift as I sit on the front porch and watch the world go by.
That's a John Lennon song, right? We're going to just drop a lot of names on the show. Okay, and also, do you enjoy Italian food? That's an important question. Do you
Absolutely.
like Italian food? Okay, would you like a frozen lasagna from Palma Pasta?
That works out so well. My wife just left this morning for 2 weeks out on Vancouver Island looking after a friend of ours' place, and I chose not to go this year, so a frozen lasagna is going to be devoured pretty quickly.
No, that's going to come in handy there. And there's going to be a lot of leftovers. I think you'd be good for 3 days, I think, with the lasagna I'm going to give you. So you got your lasagna from Palma Pasta. I have a note from Anthony from Palma Pasta. We're getting all this out of the way early. He says, National Lasagna Day is the 29th of July. So we're speaking now on Thursday, July 25th. But on Monday, July 29th, National Lasagna Day, there's going to be a blowout sale at Palma Pasta. They have 4 locations in Mississauga and Oakville. We've held many an event at Palma's Kitchen. Everybody go to palmapasta.com, find out where it is, and get your butt to Palma Pasta for the National Lasagna Day blowout sale. Okay, Steve, you're going to love the lasagna I'm sending you home with, and you're going to be like, when is that blowout sale, Mike? And I'm like, it's Monday, July 29th. You got it?
Monday, July 29th, I'll get the oven preheated so that I can enjoy my lasagna on National Lasagna Day. My Palma's lasagna.
By the way, that's also my daughter's 20th birthday, Monday. So my daughter will be excited to know her birthday falls on National Lasagna Day.
Better than the cake.
So record shops. Okay, so you make your way to Toronto. What brought you to Toronto? I'm curious what your origin story is.
So yeah, like I said, I grew up in Oshawa. Record stores were probably one particular record store, Star Records in Oshawa, was the gathering spot, the safety place for the emerging, punk rock scene and those who may not be in the mood to listen to the latest Genesis or Yes record.
Right.
It was a real safe space. And it was also the place that, through the owner of that shop, started a club called the Star Club and brought in the first wave of Toronto punk bands, a few international bands as well. So it became a real gathering spot. And it's where I first got the idea that you could be involved in promoting, marketing, spreading the word on music that you thought should be heard. So after spending some time between high school and going off to university in Peterborough, I had one of the only other 2 adult jobs I've ever had in my life, which was an auto worker. So for frame of reference, I've had 3 adult in quote jobs.
Okay.
I was an auto worker.
Okay.
I was a peace activist, and I've sold records.
Right.
And that was
Well,
that was the path.
But can you give me a little insight into what do you mean by peace activist? Like, are you like a wavy gravy on the boat with like what does that mean, peace activist?
So after I did my undergrad at Trent University, I had asked my dad to get me back into the auto factory at Chrysler, which was not the deal. The deal was one and done. But I told him I needed to raise some money. So he got me back in for about 8 months, saved every penny. And then one day we're sitting at the dinner table and one of my folks said, "So where are you applying?" Applying for what? For postgrad. "Oh, I'm not. You said you needed to raise some money." "Yeah, I'm going to go travel for a year." So that's what I did. Got back, realized I couldn't break my word. I couldn't ask my dad to get me back in the plant. I had to raise some money. I was working 2 or 3 jobs in Toronto. The idea eventually was to go to law school, specialize in social justice law.
Okay.
And one of those jobs was one of these old government schemes, right? So I was getting paid about $100 a week learning how to copy edit at, of all things, a trade paper for psychotherapists.
Okay. Okay. Well, that might explain a lot, Steve.
Yes. But what happened during that phase, the woman who ran the magazine was exactly 10 years older than me. And this was in the height of the Reagan era, the sort of second wave, Cold War. And we started to talk about, well, how is this affecting her? What does it mean for my life? And then we settled on, well, what about kids 10 years younger than me? Because I would have been in my early 20s.
Right.
So we started a program where we gave kids an audience to speak to power, to speak to their parents, to speak to their teachers, to talk to them about how, nuclear proliferation, Cold War status was affecting their growing up and shaping their view of the future.
Right.
So peace doesn't pay nearly as well as the military-industrial complex, I came to learn. It might be a shock to some. So I had a friend working at Records on Wheels, and she said, I can get you some hours there. You interested? I said, absolutely. Got to figure out how to pay my rent and hopefully save some money. So that, Mike, is when I started to meet a bunch of people in the business. And I would apply for every job that came up after a while, thinking, well, I'll do that for a couple of years. It looks like it's fun. Apparently, you don't have to be any kind of rocket scientist. So why not give it a shot for a few years? And eventually, the head of IRS Records Canada, a fellow named Paul Oreskin, offered me a gig. And he offered me that gig because of something I've expressed before and something I still believe. Marketing music is tribal. And for a label like IRS that had, REM, Let's Active, Concrete Blonde, that sort of post-punk college rock.
Yeah.
I knew where those people lived. I knew what they read. I knew where they hung out because I was one of them. So I was able to take that and turn it into marketing plans.
So your gateway to the selling music essentially was IRS, and it's funny. I listened to this podcast called The Cobain 50, and they're just going through all the albums because Cobain, in his notebook, he jotted down his 50 favorite albums of all time or something like that. And there's an REM album on that. So I just went through this podcast on REM, and there's a lot of discussion about them on IRS Records. So you're post REM when you show up at IRS, right?
Yeah, they had just left the label.
Just left the label here. I am going to play something that I think was released on your watch there. I'm very curious about that. But you mentioned, your love of like Toronto punk and the punk scene. And I'm going to shout out 2 episodes, and then I'm going to ask you maybe to name check some of your favorite punk acts out of this city. But I am going to name check a episode of Progressive, what did we call this thing? Progressive Past of Modern Melodies is what we were calling this series. And it was myself, Cam Gordon, Brother Bill, who was on CFNY for years. You know Brother Bill?
I know Bill very well.
Okay, Neil Morrison, of course. Yeah. And Ralph Alfonso.
Another dear old friend.
And we talked about the origins of punk in Canada. So I want to let people know there's that deep dive with that crew. That's episode 953. And one more episode I want to shout out is celebrating its birthday. No, that's not true. Okay, Toronto Punk with Al Nolan.
Oh, another good friend.
Brian McCullough,
Yep.
and Sean Cherry. So they came over and we talked about the Toronto punk scene, and that was great. McCullough, of course, is with Youth, and Sean Cherry wrote a book called Tomorrow is Too Late about Toronto's punk scene. So would you want to name check some of the punk acts that came out of, at least maybe out of Canada that you loved?
Oh man, I was a huge Diodes fan going back to Ralph Alfonso.
Yes.
It was actually one of the first bands that Mike brought down to the Star Club, so they played Oshawa very early. DOA was always a staple. On the hardcore side, SNFU.
Yeah.
But one of my all-time favorites from the early 80s period of Toronto music who go unsung. I think they seem to be left out of the story. It was a band called Raven Mojos, who were this weird combination of punk energy, but like a Rolling Stones vibe. The frontman, Blair Martin, I can't remember his last name, but Blair, he was an absolute whirling dervish, just one of the most powerful frontmen I've ever seen in my life. And the guitar player, Kurt, again, whose last name escapes me.
Blair Richard Martin.
Blair Richard Martin, there you go. And the guitar player, Kurt, was he ended up in Alana Miles'
Sheffer.
band.
I think Sheffer, Kurt Sheffer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those guys were unbelievable and packed such power, but never really got off the ground. And then of course there's Teenage Head. There's given my political bent and social justice bent, I was a huge L'Étranger fan, and remain friends to this day with both Andrew Cash, who I have to remember to call Andrew and not Andy, and Mr. Angus as well.
Charlie Angus was just here, I want to say 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he, and again, I have to remember to call him Charlie and not Chuck. And I'll tell you a funny story about running into the two of them.
Yeah.
I was up on Parliament Hill. We were doing some copyright legislation lobbying. So you go to each party's caucus room, where they gather before a session or during breaks. So I'm all suited out, dressed like an adult, and I walk into the NDP caucus room, and the first two people I see are Andrew and Charlie. And the three of us just looked each other up and down. How the fuck does this happen? These three snotty-nosed punks wandering the halls of power and nobody throwing us out.
Well, listen, you might get the Order of Canada before. Do you have the Order of Canada yet?
I do not.
Okay, well, work on that. I feel like that's the next step for you.
There's a long line in front of me, I believe.
Well, it might not be as long as you think here. Okay, so you mentioned IRS. That's where we start you off, and I just pulled something here. We're going to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, there it is, probably one of the more familiar sounds that came out of a generation of music, the final chord from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, an album that is probably one of the most important pieces of musicology that came out of an entire generation of music. I cannot think to this day of any album. Well, I can think of several albums that I put in that class. Certainly the best of Nat Cole would be one of them, and a couple of Lou Reed albums here and there. But Sgt. Pepper in so many ways, and the Eagles, of course, the album that had about 4 hits on it. Can't remember, One of These Nights, I think it was called. A great album, too, but that chord has resonated in the hearts and minds of an entire generation for 2 or 3 generations, and will go on to live way, way past all of us. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I know it's a piano chord. I'm not familiar with the key or what particular kind of piano or how many octaves or how many hands they're using on the chord. But we all know that we heard that chord that summer so many times, listened to the whole thing. It must go on for a minute or so. I've never timed it. I just listen to it, and it conjures up all kinds of feelings and images of a generation, flowers, flower power, putting a flower in the butt of a gun. You know the images. We've all lived through them, and it conjures up so many feelings in our hearts and our minds. The final chord of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band from the Beatles. Music.
Do you recognize that voice?
Oh, gosh.
No, I'm really testing you here, Steve. I
No.
almost feel bad. Should I bail you out?
Yeah, bail me out
Okay,
on this one.
that's Rick Moranis.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know Rick Moranis had an album released on IRS Records?
I did. The man, what was it called again? The man, the music, and me.
Something like that, but that's a cut. Like I found it on YouTube,
Yeah.
and I ripped that one just because I thought it was funny to hear Rick talking there. And that's like, I don't think it got promoted. I don't know what the deal was. It just seems like this strange outlier, Rick Moranis having an album released on IRS Records.
Yeah, it was. Again. That came out of the IRS Canada office.
Yeah.
Obviously, we were all.
I assume maybe you had something to do with it. No, you were just there at the same time.
So the way I believe it came about is our offices were at 99 Sudbury Street, and there was a production company there,
Okay.
film and television production company, and Rick's manager or an old agent or something had offices there, and mentioned it in conversation in the sort of the coffee shop within the complex that Rick had this idea for a comedy record, and my boss Paul Oreskin just went, "We'll put it out." We hadn't heard it. We had no idea what he was going to do.
He was a very famous guy.
And I will say this: Rick released a comedy record without the funny bits. It's not a very funny.
No,
record.
I mean just like it's kind of super. I can't tell.
It's meta.
It's funny, but I don't know if it's intentionally funny. Do you know what I mean? Like it's almost like maybe he's playing 3D chess while we're all playing checkers here or something. But as you know, Rick Moranis was on Toronto radio waves before SCTV. He was Rick Allen on Chum FM.
Yeah. Yep.
And Ingrid Schumacher came over and talked about training him on the board.
And he still has such a fascination with the broadcast media.
Yeah.
When you look at what he did with those, what was the character Todd's video show, like he's always been very intrigued by the power of media. I'm probably a little harsh on the record. I haven't listened to it in years, but he did reappear in my life at Warner. We also released a record of song parodies and original material written by Rick on a record, and I think I still have his phone number in my.
Okay, let's get that guy in charge. This is how small this world is that we live in, Steve. And we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna drop a bunch of names, and I'll jog your memory as we go through your career, getting you to Warner. I have a clip I pulled a recent Toronto Mic'd episode where your name was dropped, but I'll tell you right now, your name is dropped pretty frequently. Like I'll hear references to Steve Kane on this program. So I'm glad you are here. But just today, I heard from Ian Thomas. Just today, to tell me somebody sent him a link to the recording of his episode of Toronto Mic'd with his brother Dave. So I had Dave and Ian on together via Zoom, and then I put out the podcast and I promoted the podcast, but I did record the video. I'm recording this video right now, and I throw it on my YouTube, but for whatever reason, maybe this is the same way IRS treated that Rick Moranis album we just heard from. I never promote the video. Like I just throw it on the YouTube channel, and I don't ever do a thing. There it is. If I need it, I can grab it, if whatever. But somebody discovered it and sent it to Ian, and he only just today discovered that there was a recording of the video of him and his brother on Toronto Mic'd. And he started promoting it on Facebook and blah, blah, blah. But it's funny because Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis, of course, are Bob and Doug McKenzie. And for all intents and purposes, Rick Moranis seems to be retired. Were you, Steve Kane, at the SCTV reunion that was recorded by Martin Scorsese?
I absolutely was at the down at the
Winter Garden, Elgin. I always get them confused.
Oh no, the one
the
one I went to was actually at the Second City when they were still on Blue Jay Way, and it was a fundraiser.
Oh, for Ian's son.
For Ian's son.
Okay, so that's a big one. But then Martin Scorsese put everybody in a room. Martin Winter Elgin Theater there on Yonge Street. And they recorded a bunch of great footage for a documentary that Martin Scorsese was going to put out. And this is several years ago now. And there's no sign of the documentary, nor any indication that Martin Scorsese is actually going to work on this documentary. So I believe this footage, Joe Flaherty's in this. He's no longer with us.
Yeah.
This footage is just rotting away on a shelf somewhere. You weren't at that one?
No, I was at the very intimate Second City one, which was absolutely brilliant. I mean, you had Martin Short doing Jiminy Glick. You had Getty joined Bob and Doug for a rendition of Take Off.
Love it.
Eugene and Catherine O'Hara did the Bobby Bittman stuff, which just
Wow.
had
Any
people
cameras
in the
rolling
eyes.
at that one?
Not that I recall. Not that I recall.
So they had the cameras rolling at the wrong one.
Yeah, yeah. But it's funny that you mentioned Ian, because I met him for the first time. I think we were at the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and he was sitting beside Murray McLaughlin. So I went over to say hello to Denise and Murray.
Yes.
And was introduced to Ian. And it was kind of a magical moment for me because, like I told you, I came here when I was 6, 7 years old, and for the first however many years we were here, you could count on KTEL's 22 fantastic hits or super monster hits on Christmas and your birthday. That was my introduction to a lot of Canadian music. That's the first time I ever heard Ian Thomas. That's the first time I heard Farmer's Song or
Rock. I wanted to say Rock This Town, but that's Stray Cats.
That's a little later, and not Canadian. But it was so it was really. I already knew Murray, but to be able to tell them both that story is like, you to me mean Canadian music in so many ways because you were on 22 fantastic hits.
Love it so much. Now, the song I'm trying to come up with was the first Hard Rock Town. Is the
Hard
song.
Rock Town,
Okay.
the first song ever played on Q107.
Correctamundo here. Okay, I love it, man. These fun facts, keep them coming. And they're all FOTMs. Denise is an FOTM, Denise Donlin, Murray McLaughlin, and Ian Thomas. You're now an FOTM, Steve Kane. It's great to have you in the club. I want to give you the history of the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. That's going home with you. You'll love that book. And I don't know whereabouts you reside, but anywhere close to Christie Pitts.
I live across the street from Trinity Bellwood Park.
Okay,
so
okay,
it's a hop on the bike, and I'm in Christie Pitts in 8 minutes.
Okay, man, you want to see me throw out the first pitch? I'm telling you, get your butt to Christie Pitts for about 2 p.m. That's on Sunday, August 4th. That's coming up. I'm throwing out the first pitch, and I'm recording live from just beyond the left field fence. You got to make the trip.
Oh, I'll try and make it up for sure.
Yeah, I like how you're not committing fully. Like, I'm going to try to make it. That's like, I'm going to maybe be there, but no, don't want to say, you don't want to commit because then I'll be disappointed when I don't see it.
What I do know is I'll be probably out riding on the bike, so I'll try and swing by.
Hey, you know what? Since you're Steve Kane, now it's not Great Lakes beer, which is my favorite beer, but Left Field makes a Toronto Maple Leafs beer that I could get you a can of that lager if you drop by and say hi. That's my promise to you. See, membership has its privileges here. Okay, so where are we at? We got you at IRS Records. What's next in your career?
So IRS Records, it was an interesting period. When I joined, we were distributed by MCA. And then, if you remember, in the, again, mid-'80s, EMI went on a buying spree. They bought Chrysalis, Virgin, and IRS Records all within a few months of each other. So we were a bit curious as to what was going to happen to us. There were only 4 of us in the office. So I got to do a little of everything. My primary focus was marketing, but when the publicist was out of town, I did publicity. When our boss, who also did radio promo, was out of town, I did radio promo.
Who is the biggest artist at IRS that you would have worked with at that point?
Oh, probably Fine Young Cannibals.
Oh, yeah.
And then a close second, particularly in Canada, would have been Concrete Blonde.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
To the extent that people often thought they were a Canadian band because Joey was just such a monster hit.
Right.
But what happened was, so they bought these 3 companies, all of whom, Chrysalis didn't have a separate office, but Virgin had a standalone office. And God bless him, the late, great Dean Cameron, the longtime president of EMI, thought, okay, they share kind of some cultural DNA. They all come from the independent world, complementary rosters in a lot of ways. Let's throw them all together. So all of a sudden, Virgin, Chrysalis, and IRS were a label group located at Rundle House at Jarvis and I can't remember the cross, Gloucester, in this beautiful old mansion. And so that was my next break. It was I was there for about 6 or 7 months, and the then president and VP, Doug Chappelle, who's also passed, and one of the most brilliant record marketing people I've ever met, and somebody who taught me a hell of a lot, a woman named Laura Bartlett, came to me and said, hey, we like what you're doing with IRS. We like your approach to marketing. Want to take over marketing for Virgin? So, sure, why not? So that allowed me now, I was no longer working with just cult left of center type bands. All of a sudden, I had Janet Jackson in my portfolio. I had, they signed the Rolling Stones. That was a hell of a step up from, Caterwaul and, one of the offsprings of Camper Van Beethoven. Not Cracker, the other one, although I did get to work with Cracker. So that was the next step, and really taking the reins for that, and getting into the big leagues a bit. So happily doing that, and then the aforementioned Laura Bartlett came to me one day and said, A&M wants to rebuild their marketing department. They're looking for a director of marketing. I think you should go for it. Oh, you're my boss here at Virgin. What? Why are you doing this?
Right.
Did I fuck something up? But her response was, it's an opportunity that I can't give you. I'm not going anywhere for a while. Doug's not going anywhere for a while. You've got talent. You should go. So I've set up an interview for you.
That's a great boss. Like, that's above and beyond. That's caring for Steve Kane.
And it's a lesson that I like to think I carried on, because my advice to all my staff, no matter how key they were to me, no matter how important they were to the fabric of whatever company I was, my advice was always take the phone call. And if I can match it, if they make you an offer and I can match it and I can make it work for you, I'll keep you. But if it's an opportunity, you go, you do that, you learn, and I'll get you back at some point, which happened a couple of times. It's how you build. It's part of building an industry in a country like Canada, because we look, we always talk about the embarrassment of riches that we have as far as Canadian musical talent goes, or literary talent. We also have an incredible bench of executive talent. And you can see that when Canadian record execs go down to the States.
Right.
They always seem to do very well, because they've grown up in an environment where they're touching everything. They know what the promo guy does. They know what the marketing guy does. They know what the A&R guy does. Where in America, you go in to the promo department and you spend your career as a promo guy. You go into marketing, you spend your career as the marketing person. So, we're a great training ground for that as well. So that was, again, and that took me, so that took me to A&M Records.
Okay, before we get too further removed from, you mentioned Cracker. Okay, so Andrew Ward, of course, chimes in on the live stream. Hello, Andrew Ward, to say Kerosene Hat was a killer disc by Cracker. Are you there when Kerosene Hat is released?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to see, so I saw Cracker. I was at a Pearl Jam show at Molson Park in '98, and on the small stage, Cracker was like headlining the small stage before Pearl Jam on the big stage. And I had that album, Kerosene Hat. Loved it very much. Euro Trash Girls.
The hidden track.
Yes, but it was like 69. I'm trying to remember now. As I remember, that this is the first, like a lot of albums did hidden tracks, but where they had like a track at 69, and then like they had this. So who decides, hey, let's have fun with the track numbers on this disc? Where does it? That's just the band, or
that would have been Johnny and David, along with I think Don Smith produced that record. So that would have been them just having a good time, because I think they'd been doing Eurotrash live, but sort of thought it was kind of goofy and never really committed it to a record, and then for whatever reason decided to.
Well, Low is the big song on the album, but you got to stick around for Euro Trash Girl track number 69, and just Andrew jogged my memory on Kerosene Hat. Oh, quickly, sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, it was funny because with Cracker, again, a story that has always stuck with me and become part of my vernacular as well. The first time the guys were coming up to do a Toronto show, and I think they were coming up to do like an HMV convention or something like that, or it could have been the Party in the Alley sponsored by NY at the time. But it's the first time they'd been coming up the 401, and they passed through Guelph. And the band immediately decided that Guelph was a verb. I drank so much, I had to Guelph all night. It was.
Some say it is. If you think on it. Now, can you ask him? This is Andrew again, because now that you've talked about Cracker, can you ask him if he saw them when they opened for Counting Crows when they were about to explode?
Yes, that was at Lee's Palace, and Counting Crows bailed.
Okay, Buffy bailed. Okay,
They. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the singer's name. Of Counting Crows, but he.
Adam Duritz.
Adam became became ill, and had to blow out the show. We talked to the folks at Lee's. We talked to Cracker and said, "Do you want to go ahead?" So they just went ahead and did the show. And obviously there were a lot of people disappointed that Counting Crows weren't there because, like you say, they were just about to explode. And Cracker went on and just played the show of their life. They knew that they were the underdogs. They knew most of the people weren't there to see them, and they just absolutely killed it.
Love it. Amazing.
Yeah,
Now,
I'm still in touch with David on occasion. So.
Amazing. The A&M Records is where you're at now, right? So, but you end up back at Virgin Records, is that right?
Yeah. I put in a few years at A&M. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Made some lifelong friends, like people I already knew before I got there. People like Alan Reed, who's now president of the Junos. My dear friend Dave Porter, who was such a great A&R guy. But then one day I got a call from, what happened was Doug Chappelle, who had been the president of Virgin, was offered the gig running the other half of the Polygram gig,
right?
Or the Polygram group. So he came in to run Mercury, I think Island, a few other labels. The aforementioned Laura Bartlett became president of Virgin. So she called me and said, "Come back as my VP of marketing." So, to the other story, yeah, she got me back. So I go there, and again, Laura and I and the team there, Doug Caldwell, Carol McDonald, all these great record people came out of that building. And we built an amazing team, and EMI, to their credit, they just left us alone to do our thing. And so we really gelled and really started to find our rhythm and do some great things, including, signing Laurie Yates, signing Pluto, signing Leahy. A lot of that was down to Jeff Kulovic, who eventually became the owner of True North Records. Woo. So, yeah, a lot of great people came out of that building.
You mentioned, yeah.
So I go on holidays.
Yeah.
And the only person I gave an emergency contact number to was Laura. So I'm sitting having a drink with my granddad in London, in England, and phone rings, and it's for me. My grandfather hands me the phone. It's Laura, and she said, "Okay, you're going to get a call right after this from Dean Cameron because I'm leaving, and I'm going to be the head of marketing at HMV, and you're going to get a call from Dean. Say yes." So all of a sudden now I'm the general manager and VP of Virgin Music, which gave me my first experience in actually running a label.
Okay, Virgin Records.
And being able to now develop my own A&R vision, begin to shape a company culture that was reflective of my values and how I thought things should work. And a lot of it was, quite frankly, modeled on how Dean ran EMI. Artists first, Canadian artists ahead of that. So it was, again, a fantastic learning opportunity, including having to learn how to read a P&L and all that shit. So, yeah, it was.
You're on your way, man.
Yeah, and it was fantastic. Again, we were rolling. We had tons of fun. And it was also, again, a period of consolidation. So you had all this consolidation going on in the industry, and all the rumors floating around that EMI and Warner were going to merge. And it got to the point, Mike, where it was like a siege mentality for EMI. Like nobody wanted to really do anything, to step out. Morale wasn't great. And then one night I get a phone call from the guy who had just become chairman of the Polygram Group, mad Irishman named John Reed, who figures very large in my story and my life. Says, I want you to come back to Polygram. Okay. Senior Vice President, I want you to take on Mercury, Island, Def Jam, and a good chunk of the Canadian roster.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all that sounds really cool to me. And I get to get out of here where I'm starting to feel like claustrophobic or but I said the one thing that's kind of odd in there is you want to give me Def Jam. I'm a hip hop fan. Particularly that early period, I knew enough about it from working in retail. I said, I'm really not sure I'm the guy for that. And he said, I want to remind you of something that you said at dinner one night. We're talking about how Canadian record companies take the really easy way out when it comes to hip hop and not sort of selling in comparison to the U.S. The old rule was we would sell about 10% of what America sold, 10% population. You were lucky if you were hitting 3-4% of on the hip hop market in Canada. And I guess at dinner what I had said was, well, that's because people again make this lame excuse that we don't have an urban population. There's not enough black folk to build momentum. Personally, I think that's bullshit. What you do is you market hip hop the same way we used to market punk rock. And that's, you've got a bunch of disaffected kids who have latched onto a subculture. They're making it their own. Their parents don't like it. So that's the audience you're going for. You're going for the skateboard kids. You're going for, the kid who is buying a hardcore punk record at the same time as he's buying Public Enemy or DMX. Lo and behold, it did work. But I was, again, lucky enough to have a fantastic team around me who were willing to take those risks and say, yeah, we're going to change things up. I mean, you had Ivor Hamilton on many times.
Yes.
And, Ivor was very instrumental in changing the attitude within the company as to how to approach hip hop. I mean, we both adored working with LL Cool J, seeing Jay-Z in the early days. It was really quite incredible. And again, not just relying on the old, well, we'll get in the tailwind of whatever's happening in America. Let's actually try and make something happen.
Love it so much. Now, earlier you just dropped the name Alan Reed, so really quick aside here, because we'll do a few tangents as we return to the ongoing history of Steve Kane here. But before I was a podcaster, I had a blog, and I was in the room to live blog a morning show on Easy Rock. You remember Easy Rock? Okay, yeah. Shout out to the Tragically Hip and My Music at Work, because that was their slogan, I believe, from Easy Rock at the time. 4-person room, so 4 people on this morning show, and I was live blogging it all, and that was the 4 people were Humble Howard Glassman, Colleen Rushholm, who has retired suddenly. She was at a chorus station, and I think a lot of chorus people are retiring, but we'll come back to that actually, because I know of yours I want to get back to on chorus and what's happening with radio at chorus. But Rick Hodge. So we got Rick Hodge was the 3rd person, and Kim Stockwood was the 4th person in this morning show. So Kim Stockwood, Alan Reed, and full circle there. So okay, now go ahead.
Still dear friends.
Okay, great. I bumped into her at like what's it called when you, not the Hall of Fame, but the Rock.
The Rock of Fame. Canada's
I saw her at that event last year, and we'll see if I get I got a media pass somehow. And we'll see if I get one again this year and see if I can return to check that out at Massey Hall. It was a great event. Okay, so you've got so many labels. Obviously, we'll get you to Warner at some point here, but we're walking our way through it. So you're now president of Polygram Records in Canada?
Senior vice president.
Senior vice president. Okay, well, see, I'm promoting you, okay? You're now president, okay? That's what time does. You get bigger fish each time you tell the story here. Okay, and you talk about Island, Def Jam Canada. So what were some of your favorite artists that you were working with at this period in your professional life?
Oh, boy, going back to those days, it was people like like Sarah Harmer. That was...
By the way, I believe if Sarah Harmer is not in the schedule, I have a commitment from like her PR person that she'll do it in the fall or something. So Sarah Harmer, I believe, will be making her Toronto Mic debut soon.
Absolutely adored working with, gosh, there were so many during that period coming through both internationally and domestically. That's really hard to.
Well, you can
to sort
focus
of
on
pinpoint.
any domestic artists. I mean, I love rooting for the homegrown artists. And again, I'm putting you on the spot here, but
The early days of Matthew Good
Yeah.
were absolutely incredible to watch how Matthew grew as a songwriter and a band leader. He was great to work with.
he was on that
quirky.
bill with Cracker at Molson Park in '98. He was on that
I'm
stage.
pretty sure I was at that gig as well. Was that?
Hayden was there, who I saw you. Hayden's kid played my kid in soccer last night, actually, at Hyde Park. So there you go, small world story. But Hayden was on that bill. All Systems Go, which was, I believe that was the guy from, it'll come to me in a minute here. But yeah, I'm trying to think of who was on that small stage. But Matt Good was definitely there.
Yeah, and it also, working at that period also got me connected to working country music, because Mercury had a very strong Nashville division. So, whether you consider pure country or not, working with Shania Twain was an interesting, having an interesting seat at the table to watch a social phenomena explode. But my actual favorite part of working with working that Shania record, the Come On Over record, was the period where she was managed by John Landau, who's Bruce Springsteen's longtime producer and manager and partner. Being able to talk to John on a fairly regular basis was just a trip, because half the conversation was about something else. He would check in and see where everything was with Shania, but I got to ask him about what was it like to produce the second MC5 record.
Yeah.
Hey, can we talk about your days as a rock journalist here? And John's a very erudite, very clever man. And if you recall, Shania kicked off her first world tour in Sudbury, of all places. And John came up for the show. John and Barbara Carr was his right hand. So they came up to the show. We go to the Sudbury Arena, see the show, and then all retire back to I think we went to a tavern first and then back to the hotel where John finally had finished whatever he had to do after the show. Sits down and, we all order, I'll have a draft. Gets to John and he says, could I get a Cosmopolitan? And the waitress looked at him and said, if it comes on draft, honey, sure. I'll have a draft.
That's funny.
But it was, for me, it was often, as much as I loved working with artists directly, I also took great pleasure in working with their managers and learning that part of the business and understanding how those team work. So you had people like John Landau. You had people, Bill, gosh, I'm again blanking on his last name, who was Melissa Etheridge's manager. He was a real treat to work with because he was always open to ideas. He was willing to have a dialogue. And, Melissa, she was great to work with because it was just a territory that treated her so well. The Cranberries. The Cranberries were, it was really funny because they went from being so standoffish, so suspicious. And as Dolores told me later, we were like 19-year-old kids from a small town in Ireland, and all of a sudden we've got everybody wants to be our best friend. Everybody's telling us what they can do for us. And so we were mistrustful.
Right.
And it took years to sort of break through to gain their trust. And the Cranberries in particular, remember the storm where we're still ridiculed because the mayor called in the army?
Of course.
So we were supposed to have a playback of Cranberries' album that night. We obviously had to cancel it. The band was already in town. We obviously had to cancel it. It was just too dangerous to ask people to, risk your life to come and listen to a fucking record.
Right.
No, I don't think so. But we ended up saying, look, we can make it to your hotel. There's a lovely Italian restaurant across the street. Why don't we all just go have dinner? And that was the night all these barriers were broken down, and we all became fast pals. Dolores' first child and my daughter were born around the same time. So we bonded over that, kept in touch over the years. But it was those kind of little magic moments where whether it's, with David Lowery or Dolores or, Rob Thomas from Matchbook 20.
Sure.
I cannot say enough about that guy. He's just a good, solid dude.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me he's smooth.
I might have got there.
I was going to hit the rim shot here. Remind me, what was Dolores O'Riordan's connection to Ontario? Did she marry an Ontarian?
Yeah, her first husband was a fellow named Don Burton, who's from around these parts. They met while Cranberries were on tour with Duran Duran. Don was Duran Duran's road manager.
Okay.
They ended up buying a cottage up by, Buckhorn.
Okay.
It was up by Buckhorn, and I used to bump into them once in a while at the Foodland because my folks didn't live far from there.
Okay. That's what a small world it is. It's a small world after all. You can use that line. Okay, so I'm obviously I don't want to miss any steps on our way to Warner Music Canada. So is this your last stop before joining Warner Music Canada?
So
I'm ready. I'm buckled up now.
So I take the job at Polygram because I think, again, get away from all this madness, all this merger talk. Mm-hmm. Go to Polygram, nice, safe. It'll be great.
Right.
There about 8 months, my wife and I, who at that time was head of publicity for MCA Records, later to become Universal.
Shout out to Leonard Skinner working for MCA.
Yeah. We're at the airport. We're about to get on a plane to go and have a little holiday in Turks and Caicos. My phone rings, my flip phone rings, and it's my boss, John Reed, the Irish fella.
Right.
Says, have you read the news today yet? No, I haven't. What's going on? Well, we've been bought. We've been what? Polygram. We've been bought. By who? Put the wife on. That call was followed about 10 minutes later by Randy Lennox calling my wife to give her the same news, and their conversation ended in the same way. Put Steve on. So so I survived that. Both my wife and I both survived that. We both came out of that merger with jobs. But we quickly became pregnant. We're driving home one day, and she said, "Yeah, I've decided I'm not going back. We've waited long enough to do this. I just want to be a mom." Right. And I said, hon, that's probably not a bad idea. I don't know that it's healthy for us to work together and raise a family. So that's probably a good idea. And she looks at me and said, "Yeah, I was thinking that. Plus, at work, you're kind of an asshole."
It's probably healthier for the marriage that you not work together.
Yeah. So it was. So I was very fortunate to live to fight another day, and most of my team was kept intact. We had to say goodbye to some people, but again, we were able to keep our core team together, which was Ivor, a guy named Steve Cranwell, a woman named Samantha Johnson, fantastic team building. Tony Zambor, also known as Slam, that a lot of people know. And again, I still had responsibility for A&R on that, along with Alan and his team, where we could offer any artist coming in. They could take a look at one side of the company and look at the other side of the company, and okay, I think I'm suited here. And sometimes it would be both divisions of the company would want the artist, so it would become a beauty show. It would become a beauty pageant, and we lost very rarely. So I was very proud of that. So that I lose track of how many years that was, but again, I'm sitting at my desk one day and I get a call, and it's once again my friend John Reed.
Right, this guy does play a major role in your professional life, Steve. And
so he and another fellow who was A&M, who's the head of international marketing for an A&M called Jay Durgan, they both ended up at Warner. So I get a call, and the first call came from John and said, "You're going to get a call from a headhunter. Here's his name. Take the fucking call." And and that began a fairly quick negotiation to leave Universal and go to Polygram, or go to Warner.
To Warner, yeah.
Which is where I spent the next 20 years.
Okay, so we're going to get you to Warner here. Now, we've dropped Ivor Hamilton's name a few times. Do you, Steve Kane, appear in the CFNY documentary?
I do not.
How come? I feel like, because there must have been a number of CFNY bands that you could have spoke to.
Oh, sure. There was, like a lot of people my age, and I grew up with that station. I had to hang a wire out of the window of my bedroom in Oshawa so I could pick up the signal.
I'm surprised you could get it, because somebody was on the show very recently who lived in Brampton. This is before the antenna went on the CN Tower, but before that, simply still had trouble getting. It was Ed Souza. So Ed Souza, who does rock concerts and promotes a lot of 80s bands at a bowling alley and sometimes the El Macombo and elsewhere. But he was talking about, he loved CFNY, but he had trouble in Brampton getting this station.
Oh, no, I had to, like I say, I had an aerial hanging out the window and moving things around.
Who were your favorite CFNY talent, jocks?
Oh, without a doubt, David.
Okay, David Marsden.
And I used to be a regular caller into the show.
See, these are the fun facts I'm looking for here. Okay, so David Marsden.
I don't fetishize about the station as like a lot of people do.
Well, Captain Phil Evans made a point recently, which is that like he says it's almost like we've all gone back, because I was listening to 680 CFTR during this era that we're talking about right now, which I've been very upfront about. I wasn't cool enough to be listening to CFNY back in like 1985, for example. I was too busy. Come on, the Rivers Air Force was going on there. But we have gone back and sort of retroactively decided that this was the coolest station. People could play what they want. Marsden is a bit of a god, and I love Marsden. He's been over here, and he'll be back, actually. He had to cancel his last appearance due to some health concerns, but he'll be back. But it is interesting how we've decided to treat CFNY now a little differently than it was at the time.
There was a golden age. When David and that first wave of jocks were on the air, being able to play whatever the hell they wanted, or at least that's the way it seemed to us. Now, I say I don't fetishize the station as much as some, but a group of friends and I, probably towards the end of high school, all piled in a car and made a pilgrimage out to the house.
Right, the Yellow House, yeah.
It was almost like that scene in American Graffiti where Ron Howard goes and discovers Wolfman Jack.
Yeah.
And so we're standing pounding on the door of the studio, and whoever David's engineer was, or producer, came down, and we're all standing there going, "We've come to meet the Mars Bar."
Right.
And he's like, well, he's in the middle of a show, as you know, because you're listening to the goddamn radio. But David very kindly came down and, shook all our hands and said hello and all that sort of thing. And for some reason, Mike, I'm not particularly proud of admitting this, but for some reason, I was going through a period where I was wearing a World War I aviator's hat, the leather one, like Snoopy.
Right, the Red Baron.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. But David signed it for me, and from then on, whenever I phoned in with a request or whatever, he would refer to me as Steve the Hat.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And still does when I bump into him on occasion, because I reminded him of the story a few years ago. So
amazing. Okay, but you're not in the CFNY documentary for some reason.
No, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I know Alan and Ivor and crew have put an awful lot of work into it.
Yeah, and shout out to Scott Turner, who I know is a big part of that with Alan and Ivor. Okay, and I look forward to seeing it as well. But here, okay, so where do we have you here? Now we have you at Warner. So I've got some Warner Music Canada questions and a little bit of audio from some great FOTMs who were on recently. Two final pieces of advice. One is, I can imagine, Steve, you've got a drawer full of old cables or old technology gadgets and stuff that you haven't touched in forever. Don't throw that in the garbage, because the chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and they'll tell you where you can drop it off to be properly recycled.
Terrific.
You got it? That's important. Also, much love and shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. They sent over a measuring tape for you there. That's for you, Steve. You can measure what you wish. And I'll just let people know that Brad Jones from Ridley Funeral Home has a fantastic podcast called Life's Undertaking. So available wherever you get this podcast, Toronto Mike, you can find Life's undertaking with Brad Jones. We record once every couple of weeks right here in the basement. I get the co-host, and I urge people to check it out. It's very good. So there you go. Now we got Jet Warner here. So checking my notes here. Maybe I'll play a clip now just so that I don't forget to play it later. But I pulled this clip just because I was putting together an episode about Hayden's Take, because the New Music Search 1993 was a contest that Lowest of the Low were told they were going to win. I believe, according to Ron Hawkins, Bookie told him, this is a done deal. You guys won. Ooh. It turns out Head won. Head with 2 H's. Mm-hmm. And Noah Mintz and Brendan Canning, of course, who went on to form Broken Social Scene, but with Kevin Drew, etc. But
and by the way,
yeah,
Head was signed to IRS.
See, what happened with Head? Because Happy was the song that won. So they won with Happy, a song I dug. This is about Hayden's Take, which we'll get back to, but I don't feel like personally like Head got a fair shake. What say you from the inside?
I'm fortunate enough to be able to say that I left the IRS Virgin organization just before Head came out, okay, so I take no responsibility.
You're off the hook. Okay, Steve, that's why
you're here. It was
a
fantastic record.
Yes, I know. And Noah Mintz now the mastering master, and he's very busy doing that. He was high school friends of Hayden Desser, who went by the name Paul, his real first name, and Paul Desser and him were in a band together. And when Hayden wanted to submit a song for the New Music Search 1993, he didn't want to sing it. He was nervous. He didn't think he had a good voice. He was wrong on that last count. But he had his buddy Noah Mintz do the vocals, and that was Take. And basically, I had to revisit a Lowest of Low episode to get an extraction of Ron Hawkins talking about the shoe-in that wasn't. Like, they were going to win $100,000 for this contest from CFNY. And then, of course, Head wins it. So you're when they get that $100,000, they give it to you guys? What's going on? How does that work?
Well, it's actually, so perfect for a band like that at that period, because you can walk in basically to any record company, make your record, use that $100,000, and it happens out in BC as well. There were a couple of contests like that. Calgary, I don't know if they were all $100,000.
Well, Gordon was made with money that Bare Naked Ladies won in the same contest.
Yep. So you walk away without a recouped account. Like you never have to
pay it back.
Like
it's because it's just a bank loan at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
By the way, the game's rigged. You're on the inside here. We're getting back to my clip I pulled of Lowest of the Low on Toronto Mike. But to me, whenever I hear these small Canadian alt-rock bands from the 90s that I fucking love, they come in and they talk about, oh yeah, they made this video and they had this dinner with the executives, and it all comes out of the back end like it's just a big bank loan, and then at the end of the day, they end up with no money. It doesn't feel fair to the artists.
So, no band goes into a contract without a lawyer. No band should go into a deal not understanding what you just said. This is basically upfront money. And it's our job to try and get it to a point where you recoup and you start to get paid out royalties. It's really fucking hard.
Yep.
The simplest way to put it is, record companies are investors, and they're not very good investors because, the old cliche is 1 out of 10 fail. Now, you can assign blame to that. You can say, well, it didn't promote, the band just didn't click. But the simple fact is, everybody goes in with their eyes open, I hope. One of my pitches when I was courting artists and trying to sign artists, at some point during the conversation, I said these words, and I can hand to heart. I can look at myself in the mirror because I know it to be true. Never forget, we're spending your money. So if you want a limo, go for it. Now, recouped and unrecouped. For folks who are not in the business, recoupment has become a dirty word. It's all laid out what's recoupable and what's not. And, again, I've got a clean conscience. They know, for the most part, what they're getting into. Does that mean there aren't unscrupulous pricks who have taken advantage of bands? Absolutely. From the label side, from the manager side, lawyers, agents.
Sorry. I can't help with that.
Isn't that funny that I don't know what you said to trigger that, but we'll ignore that.
Well-
That's my Apple MacBook talking to us for the first time in 1,525
there
episodes.
you go.
Back to you,
I've
Steve.
got the magic. So what the other thing, I would say to artists is, look, you've got, we're spending your money. But the second thing I used to say to them, much to the chagrin to some managers and lawyers, this is something I learned from Leor Cohen, another, one of the founders of Def Jam and a legendary record guy, now is head of YouTube. Leor once said, one of the things that you have to remind an artist when you're talking to them, remind them you're the one who can tell them the truth. You're the only one that's not on their payroll. Their managers on their payroll, their agents on their payroll, their lawyers on their. You're not on their payroll. You can afford to tell them the truth because they can't fire you.
Right.
So some people want to hear the truth. Some people don't.
Right. Okay, so Steve, so I'm just a fan, just a guy, okay, listening to this music. But I'm listening to, let's say, Rusty's Fluke, okay? And I'm listening to it over and over again. I love Rusty's Fluke, okay? I love it the same way I loved, I don't know, you name it, a Dookie by Green Day or whatever, okay? I'm all into Fluke. And then I see Ken from Fluke flipping burgers in my neighborhood. He's flipping burgers at a little restaurant. No shame in that, except that I don't think Billy Joe Armstrong after Dookie was flipping burgers. You know, like so I don't know the difference between the two. One is Canadian and one isn't. That turns out to be the difference. But
and one sold millions and millions worldwide, and Rusty
and the other is Dookie.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of Fluke as well.
I was at No Frills the other day, and there was a woman walking around in the Fluke, the album cover. That's she's just and I did a double take, and I was like, oh my god! In the wild, there is another. I had to go up and talk to her. Her name is Dawn, and she's from Mimico. And I said, can I take a photo and send it to the guys like Scott McAuliffe and Ken McNeil? Anyway, and I did. I shared it with them on Facebook. But anyway, shout out to Rusty's Fluke, one of the most underrated albums ever.
I think Ken and I bonded over our mutual love of Joan Jett.
Okay. Shout out to Joan Jett. Okay, so I'm going now. Let me play the clip because I feel like I set it up and then I never got to it because that's how I roll. But this is the clip of Lowest of the Low talking about Steve Kane. What happened with Warner? I think last time you guys came over, you were talking about how you had sold out, like after how many decades of Lowest of the Low being, the indie darling. You guys were selling out.
Mm-hmm. Actually, what's interesting about that, because this is how the record industry seems to work, is that we were on Warner. I think the only reason we were on Warner was because Steve Kane was the president, as I've referenced before. George Stroumboulopoulos calls him the last punk rock president. I think he at some point thought, he came to us and said, you got to make this box set. There should be a Lowest to Low box set. To which we all said, are we dead, Steve? It seems like such a sophisticated thing to do. So we were all shocked by the idea of that, and then got really into it. And then I think maybe he thought, clearly Steve didn't sit down and go, I need a yacht. I better sign Lowest to the Low to Warner Music. I think what he did was they're a cool band. They're a legacy band. They have a certain value system that would be cool to have on Warner, and it was a good fit with him. And so there we were. And then Steve retired and was replaced by a younger person, a younger woman, a young person who was a woman. And we kind of all thought, I think we all thought quietly to ourselves, probably the middle-aged white rock and roll band is on the list at least, right?
Well, it's always dangerous when your champion moves on. Like Steve was the Lowest Low champion. Okay, so I think that's very cool though that you reached out because you respected Lowest of the Low and you respected them as musicians.
Yeah, I was a huge fan from the early days, and I remember the feeding frenzy around them after Shakespeare came out, or before Shakespeare came out. And Ron and I've had this conversation. I think I talk about it in the documentary, where the band's view was there was nobody in the A&R community in Canada who were interested. I reassure them, and I say this: there were. We just weren't the top dogs at the time. So people like Dave Porter, even my boss at Virgin, Doug Chappelle, who was, the generation before me, completely got the band. I think they were being managed by Skinny then, who was also a good pal of his. But how they came to Warner, and I loved what the band did with their press release that was basically their notice of surrender.
Right.
But the real story is actually Jeff Rogers was managing them at the time, and he said, I think you should go talk to Steve. And Ron said something like, well, how much does he know anything about our band? Jeff's response was, he knows more about your band than you do. And so the whole idea was, a lot of the, other than Shakespeare, a lot of the records weren't available on vinyl. I think Pheromone had just started to do it, to re-release them. So we saw that as an opportunity to serve the legacy, reintroduce some of those great songs, and then follow it up by what I think is one of their strongest and best later day records, Agit Pop.
Yeah.
And we had enough people in the company who had grown up with the music, who knew them, or some of the young kids in the company who just were listening to it with fresh ears. And after my departure, I can't really speak to that, what the decision was. They chose not to continue. The irony is that one of the last distribution deals I did for a label was Curve Music, run by my longtime friend Brian Heatherman. His distribution deal survived, and he signed Low Stow the Low. So Ron got to phone them and do the "We're back." So.
Yes, and that's exactly where that clip goes before I cut it off, and that's fantastic. Lowest Low, as they profess in that documentary, and shout out to FOTM Simon Head, who made Subversives, and he's a good egg. But whenever there'd be some kind of a showcase for labels, like Lowest of the Low would self-sabotage, right? They'd wear T-shirts and stuff that say corporate rock sucks and all this stuff. Yeah. So it's like this was the punk ethos, which is, so they would basically shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to selling out.
See, it's funny because maybe it's just the contrarian in me. If I saw a band do that, that would actually encourage me. Like,
but you're the first punk rock president.
I
right?
want them. It's... it's like when it's like when we signed Billy Talent.
Well, I'm going to Billy Talent next. It's funny because Billy Talent, of course, is a character in Hardcore Logo.
Correct.
Right. Except they had 2 L's. Billy Talent and Hardcore Logo has 2 L's. And I want to talk Billy Talent. Just a quick note on the whole Lowest of the Low thing. So Shakespeare in My Butt, which is next to Fluke, is the greatest album of all time. Love it so much. And I close every episode of Toronto Mike with a song from that album. So we're going to hear Rosie and Gray soon. But Ron hated the follow-up that Don Smith produced. Like, I know Don Smith...
Hallucinogenia.
Yeah. And I know Don Smith, like, Tragically Hip, for example, a lot of great success with Don Smith. But they fucking hated that album. So there's a whole... That episode, that whole story gets told in gory detail, not only on Toronto Mike, but in that Subversives documentary. That
it's similar to the experience that that Blue Rodeo had with Pete. He produced all those early Dwight Yoakam records, and that was the last time that Rodeo used an outside producer. It was such a miserable experience.
So what is your relationship? So Bob Roper fairly recently made his not just Toronto Mike debut, but his podcast debut. And this did spark a whole bunch of episodes because who came out of that? Brighton Rock came out of that episode. Donna Halper from Cleveland. She's the woman who put Working Man by Rush on the radio in Cleveland. And Honeymoon Suite didn't come out of that, but shortly thereafter, Honeymoon Suite dropped by and all these bands. So what is your relationship with Bob Roper?
Bob is just somebody I've known, it seems like, forever. And I used to go and do guest lectures for him or with him. We never called them guest lectures. I hate guest lectures. We would have a conversation. So he's just somebody from the business that has always been omnipresent. And and it's funny because when I got to Warner, the night before I started at Warner, I turned to my wife and said, holy shit, I get to work the next Blue Rodeo record and whatever comes after, because I was a huge fan. I first saw them at the Cabana Room on Spadina on the recommendation of the late great Handsome Ned, who said,
Jim Cuddy speaks very highly of Handsome Ned,
and so Ned was the reason I went to see them in the first place, and then became a huge fan, and then got to work with them for the 20 years that I was at Warner. And the pledge I made to Jim and Greg when I walked in the door, because they'd already been there, 15 years or something. And I said, I'll never let you become part of the furniture. You've got my word on that. Because that's what happens. When bands are with a label for that long, right, they can become part of the furniture and taken for granted. And I think we lived up to that. And one of the things I love about, I redid the Blue Rodeo deal at least 2, maybe 3 times. I redid Jim's solo deal 2, maybe 3 times. Greg's solo deal. I have never met their lawyer.
Wow. Okay.
The way that we would do it is Jim and I would meet at Alan's Pub.
Yeah.
We'd have a light lunch, 1 pint of Guinness, and we'd come with our notes. Here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I can give. Chat, finish our, pleasantries.
Wow.
We'd go away. Next week later, we'd get back together. Here's where we are. And then, it'd be Jim and their manager, Susan. And shortly after that, it would be a full-on lunch where we'd sign the deal. And I'm, for some reason, inordinately proud of that.
Yeah, sure.
That we were able to do business
No lawyers
with on a very human level. And to this day, I'm almost 3 years out and still consider the guys really good friends. They threw a wonderful retirement dinner celebration at their studio for my wife and I.
At the Woodshed.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah, it's a great spot. There's magic in them there walls.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool. And shout out to Mike Boguski, who went to my high school.
Lovely fellow.
And Allen's, okay, so shout out, we mentioned half of them already, Ian Thomas and Marie McLaughlin, but Cindy Church and Mark Jordan, that's lunch at Allen's, of course. So it's all coming together here. Now, okay, so Billy Talent. Please give me the Billy Talent story.
So Billy Talent was the first artist I was involved in signing at Warner. And say I was involved because there's something I think has to be said. I hear it all the time in my business, particularly if you get to be in my seat, you get to be in my role. Such and such signed X. So my name gets attached to, Steve Kane signed Billy Talent. I didn't. Not alone.
Right.
I may have did the physical, but every successful signing I've ever been involved in has been a team. It has been a team effort. And when you look at Billy Talent and how they came to Warner Music, the captain of that team was an incredibly talented woman named Jennifer Hurst. When she was first interviewing for an A&R gig at Warner, she was asked, what band would you sign if you had the power to tomorrow? Billy Talent. Her second interview, Billy Talent. I get there. One of my first interactions with Jen was her handing me a cassette and said, please listen to this. And I'll fill you in on the story. So the story was we had, in conjunction with EMI Publishing, paid for a bunch of demos or had agreed to pay for a bunch of demos. And then with the change in regimes, people were afraid to move forward with it. They didn't know what to do with it. I took it, listened to it in my car, got to the office, said to Jen, when can I see them? So they set up a show, went and saw them, and then we began the courting process because I fell in love with them.
And on this demo cassette is Try Honesty, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of the first album was on there. And, I can still remember the look on the face of my, long-term partner in crime, Steve Cody, who was the head of radio promotion. He's like, how am I going to get this on the radio? I said, well, that's your problem. I love it. And people were saying, other people in the company said, it's a bit derivative, isn't it? I mean, does that guy think he's Iggy Pop or Johnny Rotten or who does he? It's like, yes, you're right. There are qualities of it that are derivative, but what ain't? Everything comes from somewhere. So it became a real passion project for myself, for Jen, for Steve Blair, who was the head of A&R at the time, for Steve Coe, because it was there was
all
a
the
change.
Steves.
Yeah, all the Steve. There was a change. Steve Waxman. There was
FOTM Steve
yeah.
Waxman.
There was a change. There was a change in culture coming to the company, and Billy Talent, as far as I was concerned, was this is where we're going to plant our flag, because Warner was sometimes not people's first choice to sign with. They signed some amazing acts, but for some reason, they fell a little out of favor. And so we wanted to sort of change that and say, we are going to take risks and we are going to do things a little differently. We're going to respect our heritage acts like Blue Rodeo, like Great Big Sea, like Linda LeMay out of Quebec, who Anglo-Canadians know nothing about, but the woman's a megastar. We're going to respect them, but we are also going to build a new roster. And Billy Talent was the start of that, followed very quickly by Buck 65, who was also walked into the building by Jen Hurst. So it really is a team effort, and they've got to get a vibe of the company. If it's just one person, to Ron Hawkins' point, like, oh, our champion's out, I guess we're done.
Right.
And Billy Talent had many champions, and it's, again, what's the old cliche? There's one person you blame for a failure, success, or maybe it's the other way around. But
right.
It has to be firmly stated. Anybody who claims that they're the only person who was responsible for a successful act coming to a label is usually bullshit.
Well, when Hawksley Workman made his Toronto Mike debut, and he's sitting right where you're sitting right now, and he talked about when his single Anger as Beauty hit radio, like let's say CFOY, let's say 102.1 The Edge. At the same time, he heard Try Honesty, and he knew he was fucked because, literally, he knew he was fucked because Try Honesty just blew everything away, and it sounded. I remember when Try Honesty was a hot new single on 102.1 The Edge, and I'm a big Billy Talent fan. I've seen him live. I dig Billy Talent, and yeah, it just that album sold, right? Like this is music that was commercially successful.
It was commercially successful. It was critically successful. The deal was a little convoluted because it started off as a joint venture with Atlantic Records in America, who took one single to radio, and it was a 50-50 split worldwide. We kept the Canadian revenue, they kept the American revenue, and we split the rest of the world. Well, Atlantic kind of lost interest after the first single. They dropped the ball. And so all of a sudden it was, well, we're sending the band to Europe. Here's your end of the tour support. Here's our end of tour support. We don't want to pay tour support. And I'm like, well, we've got our German company and our British company who are both doing a really great job with this band. Like, we got to send them there.
Right.
So Atlantic backed out of most of their tour support commitment. We sent them, and thank God we did. And the German company just championed this band like I've never seen. They treated this band like they were a domestic act. And so to this day, just even, a month and a half ago, the guys played Rock 'em Ring again, which is a festival that it's about 100,000, 120,000 people.
That's all.
And if they've headlined it a couple of times, they've been second to last a number of times, but they were able to build an international career based on that one territory. And then it's, slowly started to expand to other territories, and they're selling more tickets and more records over there than they ever have, which is also, a lesson that I learned from the Billy Talent experience was there are other places in this world than America.
Right.
So Canadian bands, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to go to Germany. Don't be afraid to go to England. Don't be
Danko
afraid
Jones is listening right now.
There you go.
He said he's on a
Perfect
flight
example.
right now.
Perfect example. You can have a career without America. So
And Ron Sexsmith, too. You're a big Ron Sexsmith fan.
Yeah.
Because he seems to be more appreciated overseas.
Yeah. Certainly in the last few years, his audience in Ireland, the UK, a few Southern European countries have really sustained him and given him that breath of fresh air that he needs. And, Ron is, he has a particular view on how the Canadian industry has treated him. And I can't say that I completely disagree with him. We did manage to get a couple of hits away with him. But again, he was a really important signing because, I'd put him in the same category as Blue Rodeo in many ways, that when you're sitting with a new young artist and you are able to start to list off your roster, yeah, you'll be on the same label as Billy Talent. You'll be on the same label as Blue Rodeo. You'll be on the same label as Ron Sexsmith. Now, if you're a young singer-songwriter, you're going to sit up and go, I'm going to be on the same label as Ron Sexsmith, one of my songwriting heroes. He was very important that way. And we treated him as we treated him as a commercial artist, not something that, had to be handled with kid gloves. And, Ron, to his great credit, was willing to, okay, I'll try that. And sometimes that's all it takes because, you get to a point where some artists are like, no, I don't want to do that. Well, I can only help you so much. But Ron was always, okay, let's give it a try.
I did feel bad for Ron recently when they had the Gordon Lightfoot tribute at Massey Hall, and I don't think I know of a bigger Gordon Lightfoot fan than Ron Sexsmith, and I don't think he got an invitation to perform.
No, he didn't, which was
well, that sucks.
Very much a mistake.
An oversight.
But
that's why pencils have erasers. I felt like there was plenty of time to rectify that, and nobody did so. So that's disappointing. Okay, and let's not bury the lead on the Billy Talent. Wait, would you say Billy Talent is the biggest artist that you were there for the whole process from the inception?
Yeah, absolutely. They were the biggest band that I ever had a hand in signing, and the biggest international commercial success I ever enjoyed.
Unless we forget, because this conversation, which I thoroughly enjoyed, it started with Strombo, because I was misquoting him or miscrediting him, but you being the last punk rock president, it was Ron Hawkins' fault, because in his clip, he quotes Strombo as saying the last punk rock president. But Ben Kowalowitz was the producer for Strombo on
That's right.
102.1 The Edge.
Yep.
So they had a little inside, they could slide on the inside and get some early airplay, but not that they needed help, of course, because the quality of the singles.
Well, and that was funny because the first show that we went to see, again, my head of radio promotion at the time, Steve Cody, looked, as they walked out, oh, that's Ben from The Edge.
Right. Yeah, it's wild, right? Ben, who I met we had a party for Marty for Martin Streak on one of the anniversaries of his passing. Pete Fowler, actually, I'm wearing Pete's shirt today, so shout out to Pete Fowler, great FOTM. But he helped organize with DJ Craig and some others this sort of a tribute to Martin Streak at the Opera House, and that's where I met Ben. And Ben did say he would come on Toronto Mike. So, now that you're an FOTM, your job will be to remind him because, I believe Jim Cuddy only came on Toronto Mike because FOTM Steve, name all the Steves again.
Steve Waxman.
Steve Waxman.
Okay.
Steve Waxman put in a note and helped me get the sit down with Jim Cuddy. So I'll be looking to you to do similar things. Yeah, I'd love to get Ben on Toronto Mike. They got a lot of good questions for him. All right, so we're in the home stretch here. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. Congratulations, Steve Kane, on being inducted into the Canadian Music Industry Hall of Fame in 2015. Do you get like a pin or what do you get?
Yeah, I think I got a plaque somewhere.
Oh, plaque. Okay.
Yeah, it was
because Order of
nice.
Canada gets you a pin, so I'm going to pull some strings on that. But congratulations on that. So the way I want to close is just ask you about a couple of things. One is because I want to close with asking you about chorus and what's going on there. They're going to fire 300 more people from the radio side this summer, and I want to ask about that because Kingston, for example, my good friend Bob Willett was let go as program director of the Kingston stations, and it turns out there's no one left. Like they wiped out the Kingston personnel. And other cities of that size too, like Peterborough, etc. So we're going to close with chorus. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the role of Much Music and what's filling the void there, because you talk about bands like Blue Rodeo and Billy Talent, and I remember both bands, particularly Blue Rodeo, because they go way back to the 80s. But Much Music is where I would go to, and I would see the video for Nothing to Lose, for example, by Billy Talent. Like Much Music played a huge role in these bands. But where are we now? There is no. Now it's just, I guess, YouTube. Like is that the same thing? What's going on now?
It's the one thing about Much Music was for a country this big with such a sparse population, few really dense populated spots. It was a way to get a story out really quickly. I used to envy my UK colleagues, where a couple of spins on BBC One and you were off to the damn races.
Right. Here
it just you're knocking down station by station by station. Much was very unique in that perspective, where heavy rotation on Much Music for a band, it took you to a new level really quickly.
Well, just tell Mo Berg.
Yeah, exactly. Starting careers. I mean, that was bare naked ladies going into the little talk
speaker's
booth.
Corner.
All of these things that allowed, and now you've got just this crisis at radio where they've lost their way, in my opinion, and part of it was centralized programming, making decisions for markets that you stepped foot in, twice a year. So you've got people from Toronto programming for Calgary. Right. You've got people in Calgary programming for Toronto. You've got morning shows that are from that are just being simulcast from different cities. Yeah, it works for Howard Stern because he doesn't have to deliver local news. It's abysmal. And there were so many of my friends in radio, they were in a bit of denial. And the biggest thing they were in denial about was you are about to lose your primary spot on the dashboard of every automobile in this country, in the world. What's your plan? What's your backup? You're just going to take the format, the old media format, and transfer it online? I know very few radio stations that did anything exciting online. A missed opportunity. And it breaks my heart because it's, again, you're obviously somebody who really loves the medium. And I grew up with radio. I grew up with Chum AM. I answered the phone. I listened to Chum. I hung out my bedroom window to capture the CFMY signal. I don't know where it goes next, and how do we create those water cooler moments that Much Music gave us, or I guess water fountain more in high school and middle school, to talk about what I just saw. It's really hard to replace that, and as the Spotify and Apple algorithms change to serve me what I'm going to listen to, you don't even have that opportunity where everybody's listening to the same thing on those services. I just don't know. Listen, frankly, one of the first thoughts I had on the day after my retirement party at the Horseshoe Tavern was turning to my wife and saying, I no longer have to give a shit about what happens on TikTok today. Do you have any idea how liberating
what is going on over there? I've never created an account. It's a black hole to me, but I'm told I'm supposed to be there.
I'm quite comfortable not being there.
I don't know what I'm missing, but I will say I don't think I ever cared more about music than when the 80s turned into the 90s. Like I think that's personally my peak, early 90s, just bleeding out of the 80s. And just two bands in particular. We talked quite a bit in this conversation about CFNY, which became Edge 102.1 The Edge. Apparently I keep referring to it, Robbie J keeps correcting me, I keep referring to it as Edge 102, because for a brief period of time, they must have branded themselves Edge 102, and that's when it like imprinted in my brain. So that's, but it's 102.1 The Edge. Okay, neither here nor there, except two bands I want to shout out, Bare Naked Ladies and Lowest of the Low, because these are two bands that were championed by local radio, like two, B&L and Lowest Low are two Toronto bands, indie bands. By the way, both independent releases put out by Page Publications.
That's right.
So there's a fun little fact for you. I learned that in the documentary. Thank you, Simon Head. But that doesn't happen anymore, because, like you said earlier, you now have cookie cutter like syndications. Raza Mocha will be in 20 markets in the morning. The live and local is all I ever asked out of radio, and that seems to be disappearing, and it's a damn shame. And I know, video killed the radio star, and the internet's killing the radio star, but it is not the same. And I just miss a day when we were all listening to the same thing, and it was live and local. That's all. That's my old man, yelling at the clouds. Yeah, Abraham Simpson style. So. Okay, and Chorus, again, my heart goes out to a lot of the Chorus people who are being impacted here, because Chorus, that's a large percentage of their media personnel that are getting pink slipped this summer.
And you look at what happened, how long ago was it now, when Bell sold 40?
They sold anything
40-odd stations?
Yeah, and just many AM stations they wanted to sell but couldn't find a buyer for.
Well, and I hate to sound conspiratorial, but do you have any sense that sale happened because we got to get these stations on the market before Chorus goes belly up?
Good point, because it'll bring down the value.
It'll bring down the value. So instead of getting cents on the dollar, they still didn't sell them for what they would have gone for 10 years ago, but that was definitely part of the
No,
strategy.
good point. Get ahead of that. Yep. And I don't know what the stock is selling for today. I don't know, 11 cents or something.
9 cents, something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's no laughing matter. They're on the brink of bankruptcy, and everything must go.
I know we're wrapping up, but I will say this, and I share your sympathy for people being affected by really bad corporate decisions, and a change in the culture that has impacted how people consume media and consume music. But I go back and I think about the height of the introduction and the height of the Napster era. And many of my friends in broadcast would look at us, barroom conversations, and say, "You guys should have seen this coming. Like, I can't believe you got caught. Like, you had no reaction." Yeah, anybody who claims they saw that coming is full of shit. There's some kid in his dorm room programming, ones and zeros that created something that nobody saw coming.
Right.
I will say this to broadcast executives, not the guys in the trenches and gals in the trenches. You had warning. You were watching what was happening to the advertising market. You were watching the shift to online. You had an opportunity to reinvent yourself and rebrand yourself, and you didn't. So when I hear people compare it to what happened to the record industry in the mid-90s,
right,
apples and oranges, as far as I'm concerned, for the people at the top of the pyramid.
So you say apples and oranges. I'm going to bring lemons into the fold here, because it does seem to me like terrestrial radio is just squeezing the last bit of juice out of these lemons. Like, they're just going to squeeze the last bit of juice until the lemons are dry. And I realized I got Steve Kane in the basement here, and we are winding down. I was about to play Lowest at the Low, but I want to just because now I'm always curious about this stuff, and now that we had a beer in us, we're ready to go here. But just a little further on the relationship between radio stations and record companies, like how it worked and how it works now. Is it really like simply you had a rep? I don't know. I'm thinking somebody at Warner would go to, I don't know, CFNY with the new album, like new CD in hand or whatever, and talk to them and say, "Hey, you need to add this." Like, is that how it went?
Yeah, it was. It's a relationship business, relationship and stats, and understanding each other's product. Some of the best promo guys I knew they spent a lot of time listening to their stations. They understood their product. So if I ever had a promo rep who would walk into a radio station and say, you have to add this because it's a company priority, it's like, you're not good at your job.
Right.
You've got to go in, you've got to tell them why it fits their format, why it fits their listenership, what the band is all about, where they fit in culturally. Give them the stats, because sadly there are a lot of radio programmers who program with their eyes, not their ears. So they're just looking for chart numbers out of the UK or the US or wherever. So it was a little of both. There's some stuff that got added because it was doing well in the States. For domestics, it was you had to work for that.
You had to work for that. Now I know Ivor's still bringing up, because on the last time Ivor Hamilton was over, we discussed it. But Ivor, because Danny Kingsbury was program director at CFNY in 1989, he put Humble and Fred together actually, and Ivor tried to get Pixies added to the rotation, and it never happened. So Pixies was not added to the burgeoning alt-rock format at 102.1 back in 1989, and Ivor's still shaking his head about it. Are there any, you can't believe that this particular artist was not added to this particular stations? Anything like that before I close this out with Rosie?
Oh, there's so many of them.
Like one or two here.
But I do remember... again, it would probably have been the Edge, because they would have been the only station around that would have played them. But the fight to get My Chemical Romance on the air was unbelievable, and the every lukewarm excuse that could be given was given as to why My Chemical Romance wouldn't get played on certain stations in this country. It was ongoing, and probably still is. I've done just about every role at a record company. My tenure as a radio promo guy was very, very short, because I was shit at it and I would just end up in arguments.
Why did you retire, Steve? Why did you retire? We've got to close with this. So what made you come to that decision?
It's 20 years at a company. The last 2.5 years of running the company out of a small room at the back of my house, the rise of TikTok, the rise of algorithm, the idea that you're going to chase down a TikTok star and try and build a career. When I saw one of the things I loved, artist development, building careers rather than chasing hits, it's probably a good time to go and to give the company, which I was very, very proud of to have stewarded for 20 years. It's time to pass it along. Simple as that.
Poor lowest of the low, though. You were their champion, and now you're out the door here.
Yeah, they're still doing great.
They finally sold out. They finally had a major label behind them, and there you go. But Agit Pop is a fantastic album.
And I'm overdue for a coffee with Ron, seeing how he lives right around the corner from me. So.
Well, I was going to say, you can always meet at the Only Cafe, because they do serve Great Lakes at the Only Cafe. But although I know Ron's not drinking right now, so maybe the coffee is the way to go. But thank you so much, Steve. This was a great convo and a lot of great insights. I hope you're not going to be driving home and saying, "Oh, I didn't tell this story." If there is a story that you didn't tell that you need to tell, I can bring down Rosie and Gray, and you can tell it right now.
Or I'll come back again.
Or you can come back again here. Okay.
How presumptuous of me.
I want all the Steves on. I can fit 3 around this table. All the Steves. Cody, Waxman, Kane. I'll get all the Steves on. Absolutely.
Steve Blair lives in Portugal now, so he'll be tough. But.
We can Zoom him in. I'll add him by Zoom here. Steve from Married of Children. Every Steve. My brother Steve, who just celebrated a birthday. Happy birthday, Steve. And that brings us to the end of our 1,525th show, 1525. You can follow me all over the place at Toronto Mike. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. Is there anywhere that I know it's not TikTok, but where the hell can we follow Steve Kane? Are you on Instagram? Whereabouts are you? Anywhere? Nowhere.
I just spout off about music and shit
on Facebook.
On Facebook.
I did read your chorus post on Facebook. So I'll tag you on Facebook when I drop this thing in like 10 minutes. Much love to all who made this possible. Again, that's Great Lakes Brewery. Don't forget your beer, Steve. Palma Pasta. I have your lasagna in the freezer. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. The Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team. You've got your history book. I'll be there August 4th at Christie Pitts. And Ridley Funeral Home. Don't forget your measuring tape. See you all next week. I always do this. I never know who's up next because it's like I just book it and I set it and I forget it. Who is next on Toronto Mike? Oh, yeah, from City TV. Dominic Sciolio. I always screwed up the pronunciation of this guy's name, so I will fix that in post. I met him at an anniversary party for Electric Circus, and you'll remember him from City TV in the Moses Empire. So I'll see you all then.
Is the best that I can.